Hello and welcome to the February 2015 edition of Mytech U. Today, James Motes and Nathan Austin, myself, are going to be leading you through a conversation around getting more out of your IT department. This presentation is really designed for those companies who have grown to a point where it makes sense to have some internal IT resources. That's the category of customer that we call mid-market, really where, and right around the 80 to 100 user mark, sometimes it's more than that, but right around there we start seeing companies adopt that. Definitely when you get closer to the 150 and 200 user mark, you start seeing maybe 1 or 2 IT folks, and then up to 1,000 you might get a small IT team of 5 or 10. Again, these are generalities. Individual companies are different. However, but that's really the market that this conversation is targeted towards, is those organizations who have some internal IT resources, and they're being managed typically by non-IT professionals, right? It might be the CFO or a VP of operations, and they're not technical people themselves, and so the collaboration between technical people and their leadership, which typically aren't that technical in these size of organizations, is sometimes challenged to create efficiencies and really to to maximize the experience that we can get for their end users. So that's really what we're talking about today. So James is joining me here, and we're just going to go through some of these points. But let me start with a high-level overview of really a model that we use to kind of exemplify some of the concepts that we're going to discuss today. This is our above-the-line IT maturity model that we've actually just recently revised the graphics on. But really, if we start at the base of the pyramid, it's about having quality infrastructure that it's aligned with your organization. Standards. This is all the physical stuff you typically touch. Some of the stuff that's in the back room that's got a bunch of blinky lights, but it's really the core infrastructure that makes things operate. Then on top of that, it's layering on your systems, such as your accounting program, maybe your email systems, your line of business application, ERP from a manufacturing perspective, et cetera. And that's really kind of where the base support happens. And then above the line, it really gets into saying, all right, now that you have all these systems, how do you integrate and improve those systems? And this gets, and then on top of that, as you use all these systems and as your team uses these systems and you improve and integrate how they operate, you're really working on getting some good data mining and key performance indicators at the very top. And the more mature your organization is, the tighter your processes are and defined, and your people are trained on all their processes, the better data you're going to get out at the top. So it's this whole IT maturity model, but how does that translate to working together in that mid-market space with internal and external IT resources? So that's kind of the bottom line, all the way down at the bottom of this graphic. If you start with the number 1 section, is really we need to make sure that we're integrating with customer leadership, and that we're working together with Mytech. We would work together with the customer leadership to make sure that we have a good vision and a design of what this needs to look like. Then the number 2 section, this is the key area that I see most organizations in the small and medium market, I don't want to say failing, but this is an area where there's probably the greatest opportunity for improvement. There's the greatest opportunity to allocate and dedicate resources. And this is really an internal operations kind of role, but it's not just like a general manager. It's technical operations, and how do we make sure this is the integration and improving of those systems that you have. And this is really a role that if there's any one section of this entire graphic that I want our customers to focus on, is the fact that working above the line, which as you see in the graphic, there's this dotted line that goes right through the middle, working above the line and really improving this particular section, this section 2, the internal operations and the integration improvement of systems, is really where we see, when we look across our vantage point of seeing lots of different industries, lots of different sizes of organizations, the ones that are doing this are the ones that are really accelerating.
And Nate, it's interesting to me, as somebody who's worked in in IT, the below the line stuff down there that we're always dealing with, like I'd never really put a lot of thought into the above the line parts, but they're so important as you get bigger, especially how to make those effective. And I think a lot of people just think of IT as just 3 and 4, and that's it, and they don't really, anything above the line is just sort of an add-on instead of a critical part of their business. And I think that's a wasted opportunity in some ways. You can get so much more out of your IT if you can get those top sections efficient and effective.
Yeah, James, and I think that's the evolution that we've seen over the last 15 or 20 years in the IT space, as IT being a necessary evil, and IT being one of those things that yeah, you needed it, but it was really used to type up a document in a Word application as opposed to on a typewriter, right? Going back 15, 20 years, or 25 years probably. I think about when I was in junior high. I know I took a typewriting class. I didn't take a word processing class, right? But it's really when customers and folks have really looked at, well, they're leveraging IT as a strategic advantage for their operations and to serve their customers and to create efficiencies. That's really where the number 2 section on this slide, on this graphic, is really the key point. So thank you for that comment. And then as we look at supporting, so that's the integration of the operational piece. But when you get again the bottom line here, going across the bottom of this graphic, the third point there is really that in this co-managed IT, when we really want to create efficiencies in your internal IT department, we typically want, and this is what we typically see, that your IT team or that the IT staff of an organization are the primary line of defense, the first line of defense for serving customers, the end users, their internal customers. And then an escalation point is us, and that's why we have the third bullet saying internal support and Mytech, is that the primary line of defense is with internal resources and then escalating externally. And then the fourth bullet is really also aligned with that infrastructure, is that the tools we have and the systems that we've built and the integration that we've created, that we've worked to build over the years to make our organization efficient, we can actually deliver that with tool sets that typically aren't cost effective, or they're typically cost prohibitive for most small or medium organizations to adopt. So this is kind of the model that we're going to be talking about today. But I wanted to frame up our thinking before we really dug into the rest of the presentation. Any other comments on that, James, before we take the next step?
Yeah, the pyramid's a good model because it's all based on the stability of the layer below it. And if sometimes when we don't have, we run into places where they're trying to do number 1 and number 2, but they don't have number 3 really well securely grounded and good processes and good tools in place, you're just not going to effectively be able to do the layers above it very well. And so it's been pretty exciting to see when we've partnered with people over time to see, as we stabilize 4 and then we stabilize 3 and then we watch them do 2, and then we can engage in a really exciting manner on layer 1.
That's actually a really great point, James. In fact, I was in a meeting earlier this week with a customer and the GM of the organization. We talked about this model, and we talked about some of their internal resources. They actually have an internal resource that's dedicated towards the number 2 section, right? But the problem that they're having is with their current, they're having us look at their IT support model, because we're not supporting them at the moment. But the problem they're having, the GM said, that's great, I want to be able to do number 1 and number 2, but I'm having a problem at number 3. And we can't, unless we solve that problem, I can't make my people more efficient above that line in levels 2 and 1 because we're having problems at level 3. So that's a great point. They're all built upon each other. So with that framework kind of established, at least at a high level, let's dig into the rest of the presentation and the conversation here with James. So this is the overview. I'm not going to spend much time on this slide. Just the idea is that there's some sections here that we'll talk about as far as these are tool sets and workflow. There's a lot of different pieces here that get integrated and put together. Common problems that we see for internal IT people is they feel really stressed about taking vacation, or if they get sick, or if we actually had one of our customers that we support, their IT person got hit by a car walking across the street back from lunch one day. He was fine, but you get the idea. And then trying to complement each other's resources and expertise, right? With the strategic planning and things that oftentimes get overlooked when you've got internal IT resources just because they're focused on serving the end customer. And so together with the collaboration of all of that, we're really going to talk about then at the end improving the end user experience, and that's kind of our overall objective. So not spending time on that, just digging in. On the workflow, this is really about oftentimes what we see There's some free tools that exist out there to do this, but very often as an organization grows and they have a couple people in their IT staff, it might be, I mean, for instance, I know my father works for a company that does IT, he's an internal IT person for an organization that writes software, and he actually keeps his list of tickets that he does are actually kept on a notepad. He actually puts them on a notepad. He writes his notepad out every day, and he crosses them off, because he's responsible for a certain area. So that's one of the challenges that we want to avoid, because as you grow, that might work great, maybe, if you have one person, but what if you need to collaborate with a team, an external team, which is almost always the case at some point. What if you need to collaborate with another IT person, or with coworkers? Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So that really doesn't work long term. It also then creates a potential problem if that person does get sick or take vacation or get hit by a car, or, injury or something like that. How do we make sure that we can have some continuity from the support perspective? So really, and I should have started by saying one of the challenges that I think we face when we work with these organizations that have grown to the point where they bring their own internal IT staff is they haven't thought through defining what is your internal service level agreement, right? Because this is really the premise from which all this stuff needs to flow. Because if your end users, if your staff believe that they should be able to have IT support inside of a 3-minute phone call, no matter what time of day, no matter what's going on, no matter what the urgency, versus maybe the internal IT person thinks, well, as long as I get back to someone inside of 4 business hours, I'm good. So if there's that big of a disconnect as far as, well, what are the expectations that you should be setting with your staff as far as what level of support they should be getting and the timeliness of the response they should be getting from the IT resources you have available. Again, this applies to both internal and external resources. But oftentimes there's the first level of disconnect as far as what does the business require, because that can oftentimes dictate the budget you need to be allocating towards internal resources or external resources, right?
I would say too, Nate, that sometimes you can define this very well, and everyone will have an expectation, but you don't have any way to actually know if that expectation is being met. You just basically have a he said, she said method where somebody says, I submitted a request and nobody got back to me, and then you go back to your IT staff and they'll say, no, I did this, and they didn't,
they go to their yellow pad
phone or whatever. So not only you have to define it, you actually have to measure it and be able to hold people accountable on both ends about whether or not that's being met.
That's a great point, James. Yeah, because you're not going to be able. That's definitely something when I've worked with again VPs of operations or CFOs. If they ever get grumblings from the staff, not the IT team, but grumblings from the staff, that's the first place they want to go. Is, well, how many tickets have we gotten? How fast are we responding to these things? Is it within expectations? Where are the problems? Is it an infrastructure problem? Is it not enough resources problem of our team? Do we need to be outsourcing or escalating more? Right? It's this understanding that dynamic of, if people are grumbling, where does the problem lie, and how do we dig into and be able to have the data to measure that? And that kind of gets a little bit to the fourth bullet point there. But starting with the definition of the internal service level agreement, understanding like, okay, well, for example, one of our customers we worked with on the second bullet here, as far as enabling notifications and elapsed time-based reminders, is they had a subsidiary that they had allocated half of one of their IT team members to support that subsidiary. So they wanted to have some sort of a workflow and escalation so that when a ticket was submitted, it would ping this resource, and then if that resource didn't respond to that ticket within an hour, it pinged that resource's boss, which was the team lead of the IT department. And if that person didn't respond in another hour, if the ticket hadn't yet been responded to within another hour, it actually pinged the IT team lead again and the CFO. And then if it had been 4 hours, it actually automatically escalated to us. So now that was kind of an elaborate escalation procedure that they built, but that was based on that they said, here is our expectation to be able to deliver support to our end users. So if they submit a ticket, they should at least get some sort of response inside of a half day. And so they built some escalation and automation and notifications to enable either their internal team to get to it or automate the escalation to an external resource like us. So those are things that you can't do with the yellow pad, and you can't do oftentimes with with some of the free tools that exist out there. But these are some of the things that are just automatically built into how we operate on a day-to-day basis that we can extend to your IT team to help them be efficient.
I think a lot of times, too, what people, it's hard to maybe articulate what that should look like. One of the things that I feel like we've gotten very good at over the years is some prompting and some probing questions that help us help you put those controls in place, so that we kind of have seen what works and what doesn't, and we might be able to help advise, well, maybe that's kind of a short turnaround. Have you thought about, an email to this person or so, things along that line, because it can be a little overwhelming to just get the blank slate and be like, okay, set this system up. But we've got some very expert resources on our team that have done this enough times where they can kind of help guide you through this process too.
That's a great point, James. The other thing I would say is that you don't build it in a day, right? This is something that we've been using these tools and these systems since 2006, and we started with the very basics, and over the last 10 years, 9 years now, we've really incrementally added on. So we recommend the same thing to our customers when we engage together. It's like, let's start with some basics, and then as we get more mature and get more used to the operational flow, let's start layering in some things that can enable some additional efficiency. Again, if that's just notifications, maybe it's automated escalation, defining some of those escalations, defining service levels, building reports that might come out that help the CFO or the VP of operations understand those metrics and those components so they can dig into those problem areas or find areas to invest, et cetera. So, but it's a great point, James, and that's why it's a collaborative effort, right? This is where our business, for us to be an effective business, we have to do these things. But oftentimes an IT department doesn't grow from 1 to 2 to 3 people doing these things. And so there's all kinds of inefficiencies created, not because people aren't aware of it, it's just because it's oftentimes cost prohibitive. And again, the people that are typically leading those departments know they just need more resources, and so they throw another body at it, as opposed to being able to kind of layer in and know that there's some other options available. So all this together, the last bullet point there is, again, it's really enabling effective data capture so that we can start connecting some dots, whether it be a service level agreement alignment, trying to define where the problems to be able to enable a faster response time. It could be identifying a troublesome spot because maybe one piece of equipment is throwing more errors than others. It could be, so-and-so, a particular user has a printer that's attached to their machine that's creating problems. It's being able to collect all this data so that when we do need to look at, where are we experiencing problems, that we've got that data already captured and we have a lot of historical information from which to base business decisions. Any other comments on that, James, before we move on?
We live in this world every day, so this is a core piece, I think, of what a lot of IT teams are really. If they don't articulate that they're missing it, then they just might not know that they're missing it yet, because we've just seen so many problems that you can solve just by having a transparent way to do this. So it's really, I think, another one of these foundational aspects of running a good IT department is to have some sort of process that everyone can use to get these things worked out and in front of the end users and in front of their supervisors, and it's a core piece of everything that I think we've got nailed down pretty well over here.
Thanks, James. Let's move on to the next section, because these all build on each other. So the integration of management tools. So we actually end up having, it's amazing when you actually look at the tool sets that we work together. But one of the key areas that I've seen as a significant trend, not only in the small business space, but in the medium business space, is hosting, right? So the problems of some of these tools, and because we use several different tool sets over here to help do what we do, is that if an IT team were to try and deploy these tools, they're going to have to first deploy, manage them themselves, build the infrastructure to manage them and deploy them. They're going to have to learn those tools, learn how to improve those tools, learn how to create the efficiencies between the tools and integration between those tools. So that's a lot of work that oftentimes doesn't make sense when you only have 1 to 5 people on your IT team. So all these solutions that we're talking about, it's built into how we operate, and it's completely hosted in SaaS, software as a service-based solution. So to really increase the efficiency of your team so they can really focus on doing what they're best at, which is serving and supporting your staff and your end user, the internal customers of your staff, as opposed to trying to spend their time making sure these systems are operational and improving the way they they use them. So that's the first and foremost, how all these things, they're integrated, but it's the hosted solution. Oftentimes another problem that we see on the alerting and notification side is that, imagine you're flying a plane, right? And not that many of us or any of us on this have necessarily flown a plane, but you've probably looked into a cockpit of a plane before, and there's all kinds of gadgets and lights and a dashboard. Well, imagine that those are all, each one of those lights on that dashboard is one of your IT systems. So once you get to this size of organization, you've got hundreds of endpoints, right? Whether they're servers, workstations, smartphones, iPads, firewalls, switches, UPSs, all these different components that it's really, unless you have some sort of a dashboard to say for a red light to flare, you're busy flying the plane, you're not necessarily manually looking at all these lights. It's just impossible to be able to do for a person. So having a dashboard that enables exception-based management so that you don't need to worry about the engine as long as the service engine light doesn't come on. Those are the kind of things that we can enable with our tool set so that your team can maintain flying the plane. James, this is really an area of expertise that sits on your plate, so I'll hand it over to you to kind of elaborate further on these points here.
Yeah, so the alerting and notification side, I mean, this is where I live like on a daily basis, is when you get a large, like Nate's saying, a large pool of endpoints, or large systems, they're all very complex. You're looking for what's the problem or what's about to become the problem, and if sometimes the reality of IT infrastructure is that these complex systems, somebody trips over a cord or clicks the wrong button or something like that, and big problems occur. The real trick to this is getting the people who know as quickly as possible that something happened, what the thing that happened was, or that something's about to happen. And so what we do is we try and look at all of these systems from a high level, and when we find a thing that's a little bit out of alignment or that's heading towards a kind of a cliff metaphor, it's about to run off a cliff, or we just don't see it anymore, then a lot of systems kick in. And what we're doing at that point is trying to take that information that there's a problem or about to be a problem, and we're trying to pull it out and effectively deliver it to a person who can take care of that. Now, when we're doing this on our own, on our managed customers that we deal with that, we pull that out of our system, we put it in the hands of a lot of experienced help desk and field resources, and we start getting people in the alignment. And it's the same principle that happened for another IT team. The only difference being is that in an engagement like this, we take those notifications, we put them in the hands of your people who know these systems or are sitting next to those systems. And so even before the users start calling in an ideal world, you've got the alert on your phone, you've got the alert in your email, 3 or 4 people might be alerted. However we need to work it out for a given team, those people they can get that information and they can start making some good decisions. And whether it's, in the middle of the night something went offline, so right when they wake up in the morning, they know that something's going on, or they get woken up in the middle of the night. These are all those things that it's a really, the tool sets to deliver those messages can be kind of complex to maintain. And we, like Nate has pointed out, this is what we have to do to survive as a business, and this is an expertise and a skill set that we can provide to people too, maintaining it, keeping it running, making sure it's working, making sure it's alerting on the right things. These are all expertise and just kind of within our wheelhouse that we can offer out to people who are interested in that. As far as the security side of things, this is probably a piece that everybody wishes they could do better. It was in IT, but at the same time, it's just very, very difficult without some sort of aggregating tool to figure out, well, I've got 100 machines, and I think I have antivirus on all of them, and I'm pretty sure they're getting Microsoft updates, and maybe once in a while I will try and walk through them all over lunch and make sure they're updating their Adobe Reader or their Java or whatever it is. But we all know that that's pretty far down on most people's list. And you know, your IT team is typically, what their primary job is going to be is making sure that the users are supported. If your salesperson can't print that quote, and you're going to lose out on a big deal, that's going to take priority over making sure that the receptionist machine has a patch for Office. However, we all know that if we leave that alone, I don't know if anyone's heard the news recently, but there's been a lot of news about a lot of different hacker attacks and stealing things through the computer network, where movies or banks. A lot of this is traced to the fact that if a machine is not current on its security patching and not current on its operating system, a lot of times the hackers can just come right in and set up shop. And it's really a foundational component of IT to make sure that you protect those systems. But it's so difficult to do that on like walking around from machine to machine. So what we've done is, since we've got these tools that are already watching for problems, either that have happened or about to happen, when we can also use those tools, leverage those tools to kind of go through the network and give us the state of the antivirus. Is it up to date? Is it even installed? Is the patching current? Are these applications, we have known vulnerabilities that we need to take care of? And what we can often do is coordinate with the IT team to take care of that. A lot of that is just needs somebody to spend the time to go through and make it happen. And that's one of the parts where we feel like we can assist your IT team. They can take care of the users while we're taking care of the things in the background like this. Security is one of those things that's always on the bottom of the priority list up until it becomes a really big priority, and then it's kind of too late. So we can help your IT teams by getting that in the front of mind and taking care of that, and just not letting that be an issue in a kind of a panic moment later.
And on that point, James, I think, because I agree with you, and this is, it's if you have an end user or an internal customer basically that's asking you for support, and you're trying to go through your security checklist, you're just going to constantly be distracted by serving the person in front of you. But this is also the type of tool that typically, when you look at a mid-market company or a larger company that starts putting their own IT resources in place, there is a mentality of set it and forget it, right? A lot of the tool sets that are out there saying, hey, I've deployed my antivirus in a managed way, which means that the server dictates to the workstations, laptops, and PCs that they get their antivirus. I've turned on that they should automatically do Microsoft patching, right? So it should just automatically happen. Well, the problem is it doesn't. So
welcome to my world.
Right. So the tools that we have basically improve upon the fact that if something doesn't, it doesn't just sit out there and you don't find out about it until you get some sort of a breach or a virus or a problem. It actually alerts us to say, hey, this machine is a problem, right? Because it didn't get its patch from last night, or it didn't get its A/B scan when we scheduled it to. So that's one of the other kind of false sense of security that a lot of the tools that exist out there that are inexpensive or built into the solution or whatever, especially even from a Microsoft patching perspective, that really get overlooked as far as making sure, because this is, as James said, what you don't want to have happen is that this is the last thing you think about, but until it becomes a major problem, and then you end up spending lots of money. Thank you, Target. Thank you, Home Depot. Thank you, a bunch of companies that we could name. So, sorry, I just wanted to.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the last item on here that is talking about remote support tools, which is again, an IT team may not be making noise about this, but that might just be because they don't know how much they want it yet. As soon as they have this, it's such a time saver. The reality of what we deal with on a daily basis, we have far too many endpoints for us to put a physical person in front of each one of them in a timely manner. That's just not effective. And what we do instead is we rely on secure remote support tools. That what they can do is they connect us into these systems so that from a central point we can reach out and deal with these issues without having to stand in front of it. Now that doesn't mean that occasionally you might have to go over there. We know that there are times when a user or a system just is going to require physical presence, but most of the time it doesn't really need that for us to be able to take care of things. And putting those tools into, again, the IT team's hands makes them so much more effective. If they don't have to, especially in a multi-site environment, if they don't have to like drive out to the remote branch, somewhere in St. Cloud or wherever, if they can just spend a little bit of time and get in there. A lot of places have some of this in place already, but not all remote support tools are created equal either. And what we've found is we've found some highly effective ones that can allow us to do a little bit more maybe than just some default out-of-the-box options or some free tools off the internet. So again, maintaining security and maintaining all the controls that need to be in place, but at the same time allowing us to take actions from a remote perspective without having to drive somewhere or be physically in front of the machine. And that also ties into these tools all work together. So like we talked about what we call a ticketing system, or the way to handle those service requests. If the machines that are generating alerts are in that same system, now you can start collating, hey, this server every month keeps having problems on this, on a Saturday. Well, let's take a look at what's happening. Oh, look, on a Saturday, for whatever reason, this accounting job is being run, or the CRM backup is happening, or whatever it is causing this problem. You get some historical data, you get some patterns, you get a chance to really take a look at where are the problems on a network. And instead of every time you look at a machine, you're starting over again and having to spend a lot of time figuring out what could be a problem, you get some clues that experienced IT people can use to say, oh, it's this machine again, and I know what this is about. But what this also does is it doesn't require the person to have been the last one to work on it. A lot of times what happens in small departments is, if you have an IT person who's the primary help desk person, they might know that the salesperson over here always has trouble with their printer, and this is how I fix it. But if they aren't, they don't document that out, then when they're on vacation, then somebody else has to spend a lot of time and energy to make a quick fix. And this sort of thing, when we're talking about integrated tools, integrated ticketing, these sorts of things all kind of come together so the next person who helps, it doesn't have to be somebody who's worked on it before. They'll also know what the solution is.
Yeah, thanks, James. And in summary of this slide, as a segue to the next, is really the fact that it's a combination of all these pieces working together. Is really there to enable the internal resources to do what they're typically best at, which is working with your staff, right? Helping them through their technology challenges, and being, what we crave as people and humans is personal interaction. So it's helping them be more efficient at that. So that you'll be able to do more with fewer resources, which is everything that businesses are always trying to accomplish. So, and the way that relates to this slide, which is vacation and sick day coverage for your team, is that it's getting that keeping the process the same for your staff, right? So, if getting your staff used to, even though the IT person might be in a cube across the office, instead of trying to go to them and poke them on the shoulder or pull them over to your desk, get people used to submitting a ticket, right? Whether that be an email or some other portal tool, so that it can be tracked and documented, and that way then when your IT person takes vacation, because we do want to allow IT people, they're employees like everybody else, to be able to take vacation, and they do get sick, that we can keep the process the same, so you don't have to send some wide mass email out saying, hey, IT's on vacation, no IT support this week. How do you collaborate that, either whether it's one of the members of your IT team, if you have multiple, or if there's only one person on your team, how does that relate to being able to escalate to an external source like Mytech? So really keeping the process the same for your staff, and those tools that give your team the same visibility and having the right information to support the remote support tools, the security components, it also enables us to have the right information, or the rest of your team to have the right information. It's not only the current status of that device, because there's current information, as well as historical log of tickets and activity relative to that device and that support. So I don't know, James, do you want to elaborate on this one at all?
Well, just even like you're saying, the sense of, oftentimes you kind of get an expertise that you're in. You're, as an IT person, this is your wheelhouse. You're the database person, or you're the email person, or you're the, custom application person. But if you're in a team of 3 and one of those other people is gone, and they're normally the person who's talking to the end users about fixing their computer, like, you still need to have the information that that person has. So again, like just getting everybody on the same page, documenting the same way, using the tools in the same manner, so that you have a little bit more overlap and a little bit more coverage for when something unexpected happens. And I don't know if we've talked about this either. A lot of times, going to the somebody's an expert in one given thing, sometimes what happens is that those people, your team might be really good at normal day-to-day IT operations, but then there's something might come up that's over their head. And where do you go at that point? If somebody on your team can't deal with the situation, maybe it's just it's a training thing. Maybe there's it's just too much for one person to deal with. It often can happen too. This is another kind of extension of that. Your people might be there and running at 120%, but you still need additional resources to get through whatever the current situation is. That's another point in which having a standard way of interacting with folks allows us or other team members to come alongside that person or that team and continue to deliver IT service.
Yeah, thanks, James. And the key thing here is it's really building a system that provides a good quality of life for your IT department. Oftentimes in these small organizations, or they're large enough to have IT staff, but yet too small to have a really large IT staff. I know one of the biggest quality of life issues for the IT person is not having help, is not feeling like they can take a sick day, or even if they go on vacation, guess what? They're still on call, so they really can never go fully on vacation with their family. So it's really building a system that can enable quality of life that hopefully allows you to retain your staff longer, and even preparing for the accidental, right? Again, as I mentioned before, one of our customers had their IT person walking across the street from lunch coming back from lunch one day and got hit by a car. That really scared that organization's leadership, and that's one of the reasons why we have this program in place with them today. So moving on to the next step, which I think is also a key area for this, and we're coming into closing on the time that we have available for our discussion today, is one of the other areas that is oftentimes missed or overlooked or not given enough attention in these smaller organizations is they presume that the IT person just miraculously, no matter what their skill set, should be able to do all these things on this slide. They should be able to do strategic planning. They should be able to execute on projects. They should be able to do budgeting and asset planning and management. They should be able to manage all your licenses. And reality is that's really complex to do, and they probably don't necessarily have the expertise across all the areas of technology that your organization is employing. So, and one of the things, talking about the strategic planning, this is where we really want, as a leadership, the executive leadership or leadership of an organization, to make sure that they're casting the vision. That's that part. But that we can help with the design of making sure that the technology that's supporting and that's enabling that vision is designed in alignment with it. One of the challenges that we've seen is that a lot of networks have been designed and they've grown over the years with an internal IT person, and it looks like Frankenstein. Things have been bolted on all over the place. And as you grow,
what they're comfortable with, right, Nate? I mean, people are going to do what they know.
That's right. Yeah, and it might be whatever vendor comes in and talks to them, and there's a shiny object, because IT people sometimes like shiny objects that might not necessarily be the best thing for you. But guess what? It looks really cool, and it runs really neat. But maybe it's not in alignment with your vision. So it's really trying to make sure that you've got kind of a third-party visibility to that, and helping you design so that as your organization grows, because if it's built like Frankenstein, and we've seen this in multiple different organizations, if it's built like Frankenstein, as your organization grows, pressure is going to be put on those different bolt-ons, and things are going to start, the wheels are going to start falling off. And that gets painful from an operational perspective, and it gets painful from an expense perspective, because now you have to start investing in an emergency mode into your IT. So this is a really key part of this whole interaction in this plan, is this gives us collaboratively vision into being able to help you guide, walk you down this technology path. Of course, once you have design, it gets into project execution. This is also an area where, James, you pointed out earlier that it's the expectation sometimes is that if this person, if your IT team, 1 or 2 or 3 people or 5 people, is primarily tasked with supporting your end users, well, then a project comes along and they're supposed to miraculously just get more time to be able to handle that. And that also presumes that they have the expertise to be able to execute on the project. And that's really where we see gaps in the organizations, One of the things that's a benefit of a company like Mytech and our vantage point is that we execute new projects all the time. So we do lots of Server 2012 deployments, right? But if your IT team has been with your organization for a couple of years or a few years, they might have never deployed a Windows 2012 server. So being able to work collaboratively with your team from like being able to help them execute on some change management on projects, but yet handing it off to them from a management and support perspective is really the idea to help not create just too much disruption inside your organization when you need to complete these projects. I don't know, James, you want to any other thoughts on that?
And it's not a fault of the person on your team either. It's just these are varying different skill sets. I mean, the advantage that you're getting working with a vendor like Mytech is that we've got a lot of different people with a lot of different skill sets that are all coming together on this. It's very, very difficult to find a person who can do all of these things together and still will support your end users. Oftentimes, once the person gets to that level where they can do all these things, end user support is not high on their list of career goals.
Right. Yeah, the person that can do a high-level project and the complexities that are involved in those kind of things typically don't want to be crawling under desks and plugging in printers or network cables anymore. They'll do it, but that's typically not what they enjoy. All right. And the last part, really, the last two bullets there is budgeting and lifecycle management, as well as physical asset and software asset reporting, is really understanding, as you get hundreds of devices across your organization, which means you have lots of different subscriptions, you have lots of different warranties expiring, knowing when to budget to replace laptops or desktops or servers or firewalls or switches or UPSs, all these different components, is being able to tie all this information together that doesn't exist in a spreadsheet somewhere that was updated maybe every once in a while, that is just not as accurate as some of the tools that this whole program also gives us the ability to, at a moment's notice, we can pull an existing physical and software asset list that's current based on everything that's reporting on the network today. So that's going to be more current than a spreadsheet that might get updated on occasion, but it also helps.
Yeah, with the inevitable typos and everything too that go along with manually entering data.
Right, exactly. But basically giving visibility. So not only does this give the IT person visibility into the assets that they need to make sure are being secured and protected and supported, but it also gives visibility to the leadership to make sure that if they're looking for a 2015 or 2016 or 2017 budget, we can actually forecast some of that based on the current asset list. So helping plan and understanding what those ramifications are. One of the examples that I'll give right now is the final example before we go to the last couple slides, which are just summaries, is that Server 2003. Many manufacturing customers today that we have, their line of business application, their ERP package, runs on Windows 2003. Now, for them to go to the next version of Windows, they have to go to the next version of their ERP package, which is a significant upgrade. So making sure that we give visibility to the leadership about those kind of things, because that's going to have a big impact on not only cost, an impact on operations as far as how the new version of the ERP package needs to get deployed, process documentation, training, everything, and that's all just because you might have a Server 2003 server sitting out there in your environment somewhere that needs to get rolled out because end of life is July of this year. So trying to make sure that that kind of information gets filtered up or get raised up to the right visibility in the organization to not create emergencies or other operational problems. Final thoughts on that, James, before we move on?
Nope.
Great. So then basically just going to improving the end user experience. Really it's about doing all these things consistently. We have ways to, instead of just having an email get sent off to the IT person and they may or may not respond, they don't know if the IT person's working on it, basically giving the end user visibility into the tickets and being able to have better communication between end users. Looking at being able to have e-learning and reference documents, like if you deploy, for example, encrypted email, you might not use it very often, but when you do, you want to make sure you do it right. So providing that information that's readily accessible to end users about the technology that you've deployed is key. We've got tools that can be end user facing that can really help your IT team do a better job of providing that information to your end users, which can eliminate and help reduce support costs, as well as just enable your staff to use the technology that you've already invested in, which is the key. We find that gap often in what we see. Also, as your team grows, you might have certain people, as James mentioned, with different levels of expertise. So you might want to route certain requests. Maybe you have someone that works on the phone system. Maybe you have someone that works on the firewalls. Maybe you have someone that works on the CRM package. Well, we can actually route and actually have users do self-help in that regard. Again, there's tools that enable the users to be able to do a better job of providing information to us as an IT, to us as a collaborative team, to be able to provide better support to them. In the end, it's really just delivering, a consistent experience for your staff, whether they're working with your internal staff, or a different internal member of your staff, or an external resource like ourselves. James, any final thoughts on that?
Well, just, really all this is doing, too, is getting down to making your users feel like they have a voice in this process. And we all know the challenges and limitations of trying to communicate via email, which is inevitably how this all, if you don't have something else better in place, that's what a user is going to use to try and get this stuff done. And we've all seen the challenges of that. We know the limitations. It mostly works, but there's definitely a lot of gaps. And what we're doing here, we can plug those gaps. We can give a better alternative to email. Email can still work, but we can give a little bit more insight, a little bit more two-way communication, a little bit more advanced communication with an IT team between the end users and the IT team. All in the goal of delivering that better, more consistent support experience.
Well, in the end, we're all, IT is really to serve the business, right? Whether it's an external resource like us or your internal team, it's there to serve the needs of the business. And the voice of those needs are all the end user and internal customers. So if we can make sure that they have a positive experience leveraging the technology that we're deploying and supporting for them, then that filters up to leadership, and they're going to believe that we're doing the right things for the business, because we would be at that point if they're happy and they're able to be productive. So that's really the end goal. Is it's a collaborative effort to accomplish all this with really the objective is making sure the end users are having a great experience being productive using the technology that we're deploying and supporting. Because if we're not doing that, then we've missed the mark. So we've pretty much run out of time, but I'll just kind of circle back to this this last slide, which is again the overview of it's kind of the IT. This is our IT maturity model, right? So it's making sure that we identify and each foundation layer builds on each other, and then understanding that there's different levels of interaction that we need to work on. Where the top two levels are really the internal resources, really your leadership, operations. That's really not the best place for us to play. Because it's just you really need to live in the organization to understand those to a great level of detail. But below the line is typically where our tool sets and our depth of skills of our team are typically able to provide a better result down there, but as well as collaborating with your internal resources at level 3, having them be the primary line of defense, but we're enabling them to do a better job or to be more efficient in what they do, but we're still here to back them up and help them out. So our goal for you is to really be above the line. The more time you can spend above the line, the more return on investment you're going to get on your technology dollar, and the happier hopefully we can make your internal staff, not just your IT staff, but your end user customers. So with that, as a final summary, I just want to say thank you very much. Here's some contact information for James and myself, and of course our office and our website. I want to say thank you everyone for watching today and joining us today, as well as those who will be watching in the future. Signing off for myself, James, any last comments?
Really excited to keep working along with these customers. It's a really fun and challenging way to work and learn with a lot of really good companies that engage us at this level. It really excites our staff.
It is a fun engagement because we can really have an impact. So, and James is a big part of that. So thank you, James, for being on the call and for participating today. And for everyone watching, have a great rest of your day.